item. Oh, we're just now being recorded. Okay. We said all the secret stuff before we turn that on, right? And I think the document that we have to look at is very nice and clear. So we'll get down to that on item number 4. And then the meeting schedule, the last Thursday of every month at 4:30. So I guess there's not really an action on that one because most of the discussion comes down to item number 4. So item number 3, to review the racial equity toolkit, which we were sent out in advance. I know I read it earlier. I don't know if anyone else read it and has comments or thoughts about that, or did you have something to say about it?
Presentation.
Oh, okay, all right.
And then we can have a discussion. So Ross is sharing the presentation. I should also add that I have some copies of a worksheet that can be used to actually go through the toolkit, and I've got hard copies here, and we'll also post or share the document with everyone.
Is that the worksheet that's in the document?
I
it's a
think
separate
so.
one?
We created an SCT RCPA version
Okay.
of it. So, okay, we'll be sure to share with everyone. Do you want me to
I
go
could
up there?
jump in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We're still working out the kinks of our hybrid setup here. So I'd like to just give a brief overview of the toolkit.
Recording in progress.
And a little bit of background.
Yeah.
You may need to mute your computer. There. Okay. So you can go to the next slide, Dan. Thank you. So as a bit of background,
Just really quickly, on Zoom, we're not seeing any slides.
Oh. Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know.
Can you see it
Is
now?
that good? All right, awesome.
Great.
You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Hey. All right, so just wanted to start with some background in terms of the SCTA RCPA overall as an organization adopted an equity statement about a year ago. Our board adopted the statement, and we're using this to kind of as a framework or foundation of our work on equity. And so I won't read through the whole statement, and we'll share these slides with you after the meeting. This is also posted on our website, but just wanted to highlight a couple of points in the statement that we recognize that social, environmental, and economic inequities disproportionately affect communities of color and low-income communities. And for this group in particular, that reliable, affordable transportation for all users is necessary to ensure access to jobs, housing, and services. And we recognize that we have a responsibility to serve these historically marginalized communities more fully in terms of mobility, climate impacts, and infrastructure. Next slide, please, Rob. And then the statement goes on to list the number of commitments that we've made as an organization. And this also includes in the footnotes, the definitions that we're using for the terms equity, anti-racism, and equity priority communities. So you'll hear these terms referenced, but we just wanted to include the definitions that we're using. So again, I won't read through these in detail, but one of the important points here is our community engagement practices. And I know we've already had some discussion with the chairs of this committee about how we can ensure that we're doing enough community engagement and including as many folks as possible in the process that we're going through. Can you hear me?
When you look away from me, I cannot. When you're
Okay.
looking at me, I can.
All right. If I use the mic more, would that help?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, Tanya.
Yes.
It sounds like somebody in your room is also logged into Zoom and has their microphone on.
Oh.
And I'm getting an echo. So if
Okay.
everybody else,
I think so. I turn it on.
Okay, turn off the Zoom.
Okay, I'm not in Zoom.
Yeah, I'm not in Zoom.
I'm turning my mic on.
Oh.
Are
this
you
mic
muted
is-
too? Oh, that
I mean,
way.
Oh, so we should all turn our mics off when we're not actually talking, probably.
it's my turn.
I
Except
think
it
just 'cause
doesn't.
It's
Yeah.
close to it.
All right. And I'll try to talk more to the room than looking at the screen. So at any rate, these are our commitments that we've made as an organization. So community engagement. We've also talked, and our board has talked about looking at how we can integrate the concept of equity criteria into our funding formulas. And this will come into play as our this committee and the other committees start to put together your project lists and start thinking about the criteria that should be used to evaluate future projects for consideration of fundings, any inputs that you all have about the equity piece of that will be very important. And that we consider this to be a living document and we'll continue to update it and revise it as needed. Next slide, please, Ross. So turning to the Racial Equity Toolkit, this is a tool that was designed by an organization called the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. And this is an organization that supports local governments in integrating equity into their practices. And they developed this toolkit to help us go through a set of questions designed to really think about more explicitly racial equity in the decisions that we make and the policies and the practices and the programs and our budgets, and to be very proactive in identifying, for example, when a program that we're seeking to roll out might have some built-in inequities in it, in terms of maybe we're only rolling it out in one language and it's targeted, it's going to be used by a wide variety of folks in the community, and we should really be including other languages as part of that rollout. So that's one example there. Making sure that we're identifying clear goals, objectives, and outcomes related to equity. And again, engaging the community in our decision-making processes. Thinking about who might benefit or be burdened by a given decision. I think this will be key as we're looking at the recommendations that we bring to the board. Making sure, and this could come into play, for example, in terms of how this group recommends percentage of funding provided to different types of projects. So the funding that might go towards electric vehicles or electric mobility solutions versus bike, ped, and transit investments. So thinking about how your recommendations could really help or not help a particular part of our community, and possibly have negative unintended consequences. And then lastly, develops mechanisms for successful implementation, which probably doesn't apply as much with this effort because we're really talking about developing a set of recommendations, not actually implementing a specific project. Next slide, please, Ross. So then the tool itself is actually on the surface a very simple set of questions, but as I've thought about applying this and tried to apply it to projects that or a project in particular, actually, that I'm working on, it's not quite so straightforward, but it really is meant, as I understand it, to be an iterative process. So first is simply to state, what is the policy program project that is being proposed or considered? What are the desired results and outcomes from that proposal? Looking at the data that you have available, what is the data telling you in terms of the existing community that you're designing this solution for? And then the community engagement, how have you engaged the communities that are going to benefit or be impacted by this project? Are there opportunities to expand engagement, which is an area that we've certainly talked about in the effort that we have going on here. And we know that we have opportunities to expand our engagement, and I can talk about how we're planning to address that. Then doing your analysis, so looking at who would benefit from or be burdened by the proposal, what strategies could you implement that would advance racial equity in your work, what's the plan for implementation, and then how do you hold yourselves accountable? And again, I think steps 5 and 6 may not be as applicable to the work of this committee, but I think certainly the first 4 would be very applicable. So then I just wanted to talk on the next slide or two about some of the tools that we have available to us. So from a data perspective, for example, there are a number of really excellent online resources and mapping tools. So as you start to think about the geographic location of potential projects, we can use this equity priority community map, and I've included a link on the slide, and it'll be in the materials that we send out to you to identify what parts of our community might be more impacted than others, or might need a particular solution more than others, based on these different criteria related to equity. And then next slide. Just wanted to call out that we do have some data available to us that was gathered as part of the Comprehensive Transportation Plan update process. And this plan was adopted by our board in, was it 2021, Dana? I remember the adoption. So the data is more recent than some of the other engagement that we've done. So just wanted to call out that there is an appendix to the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and I have a hard copy here with me in the room, but this document is available online on the SCTA website. And there's an appendix called A11 Community Voices. And it basically summarizes the results of the outreach that was done, both broad outreach via tools like a survey that was distributed broadly, public meetings that were open to everyone, or community-wide, And then we did specific listening sessions, partnering with community-based organizations. And I think that's the information that's really, could be very informative to this group as we think about the equity toolkit. And again, looking at the projects and programs that you're thinking about for your recommendations. So we have this data in the CTP document, and just a couple of graphs here from, I think these were from the survey. So, the feedback on what are the top issues with the transportation system. It takes too much time, harms the environment. And then looking at transit priorities, which is too small for me to read right now, but you can, see in terms of providing service for seniors and disabled persons, expanding the hours. I think that's a consistent piece of feedback. Building housing in communities, commercial buildings close to transit, so it's easier to use, et cetera. So that's one example of some data that we have. And I think that was my last slide. So I'll open it up to any comments, questions, thoughts from the group in terms of how you might want to either use the toolkit or ways that we as staff can help support you in your work, which could be, for example, we'd like data on this, or we'd like to know more about a particular part of our community in terms of the issues that they're facing. So definitely would welcome, any questions or needs that you're seeing as you think about the topic of equity.
Why don't we go to the folks at home first? I'll wait because I'm always the first person to grab a mic and start blabbing. So I will wait until later and let other people have a chance first. So can you raise your virtual hand if you would like to weigh in on this? Okay, either nobody has their hand up or I can't see the tiny little hands.
I don't
see any yet.
I don't see any yet. Okay, but of course Zaino has a question here. So we'll go ahead and let Zaino formulating this.
Of course.
Huh?
Of course.
Well, it's not a bad thing. You always have.
No.
Is Zeno muted?
Anyhow, so I actually did talk with a friend about this this morning, and there seem to be two types of approaches. One is like looking at existing inequities and trying to design programs that address these, and the other having a program and then assessing whether it impacts different demographics differently. And so for the first one, you need to have a lot of information about the county, and I only saw some indication of the geographic, I don't know, hotspots or areas.
Oh, on the map, the equity priority community.
And so I wonder what range of information are you going to access to evaluate both types of approaches?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that I have a concrete answer. I mean, we can, so there's a map that I shared. There's also a tool called CalEnviroScreen, and it has a number of other indicators like asthma, for example. I don't think it has transportation specific indicators, but that certainly could be a tool that we look at to identify, areas of high asthma, for example. Is that potentially due to pollution, proximity to highways, that type of thing? So that could be one way of understanding a community, kind of the existing issues. I think the feedback that we've gotten, for example, on the CTP survey around transit needs is an example of gaps in our existing system for people that are transit dependent and don't have, the system is not serving their needs because it doesn't run late enough, it doesn't run often enough, et cetera. So I think we have some pretty clear data around that. I've also, in some trainings that I've been, there's the term used, designing to the margins. So thinking about how do you design a system that really meets the needs of people who maybe don't have cars or who have to commute long distances because that's, they have to live someplace inexpensive and then their job is somewhere else. So really thinking about what kinds of solutions could we design for folks that have those life circumstances. And then designing a system for those needs then would meet the needs of a broader group of people. So a couple thoughts, but definitely don't feel like I have the answer to that question. And welcome.
Well, I'm thinking, just to follow a bit, so I'm thinking as we electrify, people will sell their car to the next owner, which is probably a person who has less money. And so they're really commercial engine that have low quality will end up with the people with less money eventually. So that could be a concern for a program that looks at equity. And the question is then, yeah, how do you identify this kind of trend, this population? What kind of program are you designing around it? That kind of.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And in fact, there is a group out of Stanford, which you may have heard of, that's done some work in Sonoma County trying to understand how do we ensure that as we electrify, we don't just end up moving all of these polluting cars down to those who can't afford to electrify, and we keep those cars in our pool of vehicles longer. How do we make it possible for folks to invest in whether it's, you know, a fully electric vehicle or hybrid vehicle and get those gas powered cars completely off the road? What kinds of programs might be needed? So that's a great example of, and some unintended consequences perhaps of this work that we're doing.
I see Alexa's hand up there.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to echo, well, I want to thank Zeno for mentioning that those two ways to go about it. And I hope that we do a little bit at least, or a lot. I would favor the former of like identifying the existing inequities and thinking about how we can weave solutions to those inequities into the work that we do. And I think the reason to do it that way is because otherwise we're crafting our proposals first based on our limited perspectives and then trying to work backwards to equity. And I feel like that might not be as successful. And I don't know if you, Tanya, were going to say anything about the new proposal that you and Suzanne are putting together to work with community partners.
Yeah,
but I think that that would be a great place to ask them to identify what they see as the biggest obstacles to equity for their constituent groups, you know, and maybe have those present in our, you know, as we are making decisions about what to include and what to highlight among our programs.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to share a bit about kind of where we're at with that. So what Alexis is referring to is we have in our committee structure, we have the notion of environmental justice advisors, and we have some funding from the Community Foundation that initially we had hoped to hire a consultant to fill that role. We did an RFP and did not get any proposals back. So we've retooled the kind of the role and the set of responsibilities, and we have invitations out to several community-based organizations to basically partner with our CPA using that funding to support their involvement. And that they would be helping us, you know, helping this committee and the other committees identify those inequities as you share, Alexa, and also helping us with actual community engagement. So planning and helping facilitate workshops, listening sessions with their members of their organizations and out in the community. So we have the invitations are out. I know at least 2 of them are interested, and so we just need to work out the details and get those folks hopefully on board soon. But that's a way that we plan to really have more support for the committees and the work we're doing around equity.
Okay, thank you. Steve. Steve,
he's
can't
on
hear
mute.
you. You need to unmute yourself.
Time to unmute. Okay. One approach is to use a cost benefits analysis, which you can use in various different ways. Who's going to benefit and how much from what you do, and who's going to suffer the costs. And of course, this can be an endless effort, but at least it gives us a measurable approach. I guess I'm speaking as an economist.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Okay, any, before I start running off, yeah, tell me your name. You came.
Yeah, sorry, I'm late. It's Claire Nordley.
Okay.
So thanks, Tanya, for the summary, because that's exactly what I was going to ask, actually, is because at the last meeting we had talked about bringing in community partners. So the process that you're describing, is that like on a parallel path to this process? I mean, are we going to have community-based partners come to this meeting and talk, or is it sort of, we're gonna gather their ideas and incorporate them into ours, but we're never actually gonna meet?
We'd like
with
to
that
have,
group?
we'd like to have them come to these meetings. Yeah, for
Okay,
sure. Yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, nothing better than hearing, directly from people as
Yeah.
opposed to our
Yeah.
interpretation of
Yeah.
what other people want.
Mhm.
So that's great. Okay, that's what I was gonna ask.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Playing with my mind too much. Now it's flashing red and green.
Uh-oh.
For it.
Oh, just leave it. It takes a moment to wake up. after
Oh,
you-
okay. Okay. Yeah, so, Judy Heumann, who was one of the founders of the disability rights, movement and who just died, recently, used to always say, nothing about us without us. Meaning, don't talk about us without us being in the room. Don't make decisions about us without us being in the room. And I keep finding myself frustrated with us having this conversation again and again and again, not just SCTA, not just this event. I mean, just in so many spaces, where we're we're in rooms that are predominantly white. We're doing meetings during the workday, in a particular environment that, we're talking about how to serve other people that aren't here, and not just that they're not here, but we're not going there. One of the best trainers and facilitators that I ever worked with in this whole area said, basically the problem, or part of the problem, is that when we sit here and say, oh, we want to be more diverse, we want you to come to us. We want you to come to our spaces and come talk about these things we want to talk about and be involved in the stuff that we want to do. We are not out being active participants in those communities, right? We have to get out of our own spaces and go to them, not just keep asking them to come to us, both as individuals or pay a few people to come to us. I have to say, I actually wasn't really impressed with that document, like the 16-page document about racial equity that didn't even talk about race. It was just the whole conversation feels very bloodless. It doesn't feel connected to actual people. Right. And that's what we're trying to design stuff for people. And to just talk about, well, the data about this community and la, 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 we're not actually talking to any people. And I just keep getting frustrated with that. And I don't know how to fix that in this context.
So one thought, Eris, and maybe I was not clear enough in my description of the agreements that we'd like to set up with the CBOs, is that we do want to work with them to actually have meetings out in their community. Now, whether it's this program committee
Mhm.
meeting or it's some additional meeting, that's certainly open for this group to
Mhm.
talk about, but a way that we can be out in the community at one of their meetings or at a fair, I don't know what the venue would be or the options, but definitely want to be out in the community and getting input that way. And yes, I would also like to see more participation in these meetings, but you're right, there's barriers to doing that. So would definitely appreciate, I'm not opposed to having this meeting take place somewhere else. If you think that would be a good option for us to pursue, yeah, let's definitely think about ways that we could be more inclusive and get out into the community more.
Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Oh,
Oh,
please.
I don't know, Mike. I was just gonna say.
There's an extra one over here if you
Yeah.
want.
Apologies. I was just gonna say, hey, I agree with your assessment, but also we are gonna be tabling at several events coming up. There's that
Oh,
SSU Latino environmental event,
Yeah,
as well
it's
as
a family
the,
resource
Yeah.
fair, I think, yeah.
as well as the Los Cien event coming up. So we are trying to get out there, at least in the big.
Okay, which again
space.
are going to be folks who are more like us in terms of being professional or student or educated, right? Go to the North Bay Cruisers Bike Show on the 22nd. Actually, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's different axes of diversity, right? Not just race. Not every white person or every Black person or whatever is the same. If people have different socioeconomic backgrounds, different education levels, are also different things. And if our tendency is first to always go to those groups that are more composed of people who are, okay, maybe they're, different ethnicity, but there's other ways that they're still sort of like our professional selves, we're still missing people. Go hang out at Mitote. We should go hang out at Mitote,
That-
come on the
that
Taco
idea
Tuesday
is-
ride, I mean, Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. Does anybody else want to comment? Yeah, Claire, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, maybe it's worth sort of getting in the weeds with us in this group. I don't know if this is the right forum for that, but I mean, literally coming up with a list, just spending, 10 minutes or something like that. Like, what are our connections here? Like you just said, you're going to the
Yeah,
North Bay
right.
Bike. Okay, great. Like, do we have a poster? Is there a flyer? Is there something that we can like literally get from you that
Yeah,
we could
yeah.
bring to an event?
Mhm.
And maybe it's worth just taking that time for all of us to think through right now what our connections are. And then think about like, okay, what is that actual path? Like,
Mhm.
does that mean we have a table? Well, then who's going to volunteer? What date is it? Like, get an Excel spreadsheet that kind of details out those
Mhm.
actionable items. Cause we can talk about it forever, but
Yep.
once we put it down on paper, it's difficult to
Yeah.
make it happen.
Yeah, as well as what other axes of diversity and inclusion and exclusion on all that we're talking about, right? Not just race. There's lots of other, right? Most of the meetings we come to are not just a room full of mostly white folks, but I've not seen anybody come in with obvious disabilities other than my always harping about my hearing loss. Or, there's other things we're missing. And there's probably things we're missing that we don't even know we're missing. Yeah, so.
Well, give two examples. The homeless population, probably one of the most vulnerable population in terms of getting around town, right? And if we start thinking about who do we know, I wouldn't be able to connect you with any homeless person. But there is like community bikes, which is like a volunteer bike store
Mhm.
that offers like sheep bikes, and maybe it doesn't reach all the way in the homeless population, but it's a way to connect with a demographic that is not like organized,
Mhm.
professional. And then I need to repeat. So last time I mentioned that there's no person in this group who is electric automobile organization type person, right? And a big part of our transportation is probably going to be directed inevitably by providing electrification of cars. And so I wonder whether they're having some effort to connect with the North Bay Electric Automobile Association.
Do you have connections with them?
I do.
Okay, invite them.
But I wonder whether, since I mentioned this last time,
I think they're on our list. I don't need to confirm, but yeah, I think we've been doing pretty broad outreach, I haven't personally reached out to the organization, but they're on our citizen advisory
Yeah,
committee, so.
yeah, Jerry is certainly in our main list as well as
Yeah.
being on the.
But yeah,
CPC.
if you have someone you want to reach out to directly, that would be great. I think a personal invite always goes a long way.
yeah, so they're meeting every month at Sonoma Clean Power in the room in the back. Yeah. So they're quite organized, but they're a bit outside the climate. They're motivated from way back by engineering
Yeah.
motives, and that's slowly changing. So I think it's a group that Gary Glazer is part of it, and he is very active on different MDC and at the county level also.
BC, did I see your hand go up? No, it went back down.
I'll just jump in really quick. Even though I certainly support electric vehicle groups being included here, I wanted to point out, though, that EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, has been a major topic of the Buildings Committee. And so many of those actions are actually included on our lists and are in the larger mix, even though they haven't been discussed directly here. So I just wanted to point out we're not missing the boat completely. We have more work to do, but it's on the list, but it's been talked about by the Buildings Committee so far.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I don't see any other hands, and this is obviously a topic that we could just spend all day talking about, and I'm noticing the time, and we have a lot of other stuff to talk about too, so I thought maybe we would move on, but maybe we can all, I like Claire's suggestion that if we all think about who do we know that is not like us? Right, in whatever axes there is, whose voice could be included, whether they come to a meeting or not, or whether we go out and just talk to them, right? Go out and just talk to your friend and record them or take notes and, see what you learn about, transportation issues that other people are having.
I just want to say that I'll commit to talking to someone. I know a person who works at Community Action Partnership. So I will
Great.
reach out to them and see
Great.
if they can come to next meeting. So I'll just throw out a commitment so that it is in the minutes or whatever. So it makes it actionable. I'm all for those actionable
Awesome.
goals. So hopefully next time. Thanks.
Okay,
Okay.
and I have connections with the disability rights community, so I'll see
Great.
who I could get who would be
Great.
interested in coming, because
Thank you.
of course, there's some transportation things that like make it better for people with certain disabilities that make
Yeah.
it harder for people with
For others.
other disabilities, but that's true about everything, right? So nothing's perfect. Okay. All right, seeing no more hands, let's move on to item number 4, to determine key program project recommendations for further evaluation. And so can one of you bring up that workbook page so everybody can see it?
The Excel spreadsheet or
It's the one that was called Funding Allocation Workbook.
Hey, Ross, if you need, I can share that from here.
Want to share it, PC?
Yeah, give me just 1 second.
Although it's going to be so teeny, it'll be hard to see on, hopefully folks who received the on your agenda and can click through, and I have it on my laptop so I can see it better than what's up there on the screen. So
So to make it large enough to read, we can't see the whole page.
I
So
know.
you can just let me know. I will leave it here and let me know if you'd like it larger.
Maybe we could do one column at a time, or so folks can see it.
well, maybe the first is to just kind of look at the overview. So we went through a whole list of different stuff from the what was the name of that document, Tanya? The climate mobilization strategy, and pulled out the ones that, we sort of seemed like were good candidates to discuss, to talk about putting into the measure. And I think it was BC who put this version of it together in sort of 3 buckets of bike and ped, transit operations, and then other sort of personal mobility stuff. And then down at the bottom were some other considerations that we didn't really talk about that much, that were more overarching, like education, workforce training, and the equity piece. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to start with an overview conversation or dive into chunk by chunk. Did anybody who read this over before the meeting have any sort of overview thoughts before we go, column by column?
Eris, can I just jump in for a second?
Sure.
And I'd like you or BC or anybody else who wants to fill this in, just for folks who are seeing this for the first time. This is an approach that each of the subcommittees is taking to identify, sort of the high level principles, and then the projects that would make good on those. And then that would help us, if I am understanding this correctly, BC, correct me if I'm wrong, then we can start evaluating these with the various criteria that we think are relevant once we have the lists.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have been attending a few meetings the last 2 weeks of transportation planners and committees. And one thing I was impressed by was that infrastructure projects take a long time to get done. And often when you raise an objection or a correction or an idea, they say, well, this was already in the pipeline before I went to graduate school. I'm kind of exaggerating a bit, but this project I didn't invent myself. I inherited from a previous planner. And at this moment, the funding is already restricted. You can do only A, B, and C. So I think we need to keep that in mind if we want to do things in the next 2 years. It probably cannot be like big infrastructure things and so I would advocate for identifying some soft approaches, like reducing speed limits. There's some openings in that area, I think, legally, and it can be accelerated in terms of staff time, looking into that, and publicizing these options for reducing speed limits in urban areas. Like Fulton Road, we talked about Fulton Road in one of these meetings, and the speed limit is 45, and there is like no protected bike lane there planned. So people probably will feel uneasy expanding their biking on that road. So that's kind of my general remark, that I think since it takes so long to do infrastructure through all the funding and legalities and staff, try to identify something that can be done without that baggage, if I may call that baggage.
Okay, the challenge with this though, Zeno, is that the whole purpose of this whole initiative we're working on is raising funding in order to do things, you know, to raise money to make physical improvements. Policy isn't really part of this initiative. As much as it's things that I think we all need to do in the world, yeah, that we need policies like that. But this particular initiative that we're working on is for specifically raising money for physical improvements and perhaps some related programs.
When I checked in the speed limit thing, there was lack of staff time. So there's some funding issues. I'm not sure whether it's a grant. But if we as a county really make this a focus, maybe there's a grant. So I wouldn't say that only infrastructure is grant worthy. There are probably other aspects of intervention that could be funded.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could maybe just add.
Sure, go ahead,
that,
Anya.
I think one of the recommendations could be like more like a program, whether it's specific to speed limit, but you know, a Vision Zero safety program or that type of thing. It could be an example of a program that you could recommend be considered for funding. So, but yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Eris, that we're not looking so much at policies, but.
So looking at the list of things here as an overview, does anybody see anything that is like glaringly inappropriate? Like, why would we have this in here? Let's take this out. Or anything that comes to mind that is missing in terms of actions in these three categories that would, you know, help reduce greenhouse gas emissions? I'm sorry, could you speak into the mic so other people can hear you too?
Can we zoom in on each column?
Sure, we can do, can we do that, please? BC, can you like zoom in on the first bucket of bike ped improvements?
How's that look?
Okay. At some point, we may want to probably not time today, but something to think about for future meetings is how would we want to prioritize any of these, right? Because there's a lot.
I agree with that, Eris. And then I would also just say, with the promotion of safe routes to schools, fully in favor of that. I'm wondering if it belongs in the column below this one with
Yes.
education.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it could be moved there. There are sort of, I mean, there's the Safer Routes to School education programs that the Bike Coalition does, and there are some other buckets of money sometimes out there that folks use that same phrase in terms of infrastructure improvements around schools. But I have no problem with that being moved down to the other category.
Yeah, I'd like to actually call out both. So have like the educational programs in the schools and then also as a part of like improved maintenance on bikeways and sidewalks. Maybe specifically call out schools as a high priority area. Especially at least in Santa Rosa, there are a lot of elementary schools that don't even have sidewalks in the blocks surrounding them. So,
Yeah. The one thing that comes to my mind looking at this list is that as much as I have been pushing for improved wayfinding in a lot of different settings, if I had to like drop something on that list further down, that might be one of them. I mean, I think the improved, the upgrades, new facilities and improved maintenance on existing facilities and parking so people can actually, you know, shop or whatever. Seem, you know, the more drivers of actual behavior. I guess that's for me a key piece of evaluation is how much of a driver of behavior change, you know, is this action?
I was going to ask about the row 11, improved pedestrian facilities at Transit and Activity Center. What is a pedestrian facility?
Sidewalks,
Okay.
yeah, sidewalks, curb
Like a building.
cuts. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Planner
Okay.
talk, so.
And what?
Planner talk.
Thank
It
you
could
for
be,
asking that.
Yeah, crosswalks, bulb outs, you know, just various things that make it easier to.
Street comp.
Crosswalks,
Yeah,
the
okay, got it.
beacons, you know, and all of that stuff.
Got it.
Yeah. I'll jump in really quick with a comment. Any of these, maybe facilities should become amenities. And on some of these, maybe there's actually some examples that can be included. And I encourage members of the committee to work through this list. Send us those comments because you can do nothing but make this better. So.
I only understood about half of what you said. Unfortunately, maybe other people got it all, but
I think input from everyone will make the wordsmithing better.
okay. And I probably should ask who's taking notes. I know we're being recorded. Okay.
I have a logistical question. So, you know, we're coming up with this list. Obviously, there's a very high level. We don't, you know, like row 9 upgrades to bicycle network, you know, like, well, which network in which city and which area, you know, and what's the network. So obviously they're very high level, which is great. But so logistically, so we come up with this list. And then is this list going to get translated into like what a ballot measure would be written like? And so
Yes.
would we have, okay, so would we have further examples in that? Or is this the actual language that would be used in that measure?
That's one of the things we're still working with is like what level of granularity, how specific do you want to be with, you know, exactly this kind of thing? Because if you're too specific, then some new technology comes along. But if you're too vague, then, you know, you end up wasting money on stuff that doesn't work. So that's something that along the way will get, you know, further discussed and refined.
Okay, that's super helpful because I was just thinking like, if I don't know what pedestrian facilities are, nobody, not that I'm an expert, but you know, maybe more so than the general public. So, you know, just wordsmithing something like that to make it more accessible to people, saying like, I'm going to improve sidewalks. That makes a lot more sense than improve pedestrian facilities.
Okay, we
to
can
me.
think about language. Yeah, great. Thanks. And so okay, I see lots of hands up now. Let's see, maybe somebody who hasn't spoken before. How about Emmett?
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick comment on the bike and pedestrian section. I'm I would be interested, I'd be curious to hear what others think in having something called out for quick build projects, like a fund that's explicitly for quick build, just because I think that's one of the important things in terms of like transportation infrastructure, and the climate change timeline that we're on is we can't be doing lots of major projects that take 3 years to get going. So I think that like the quick build is a good tool.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Alexa?
Yeah, thanks for making that point, Emmett. I'm a big fan of quick build, both because it gets built more quickly, and also if you use the right materials, you can change it and modify it as you figure out how people use it. I just wanted to say, as a process point to answer, I didn't know who asked that question, but I think, you know, whenever you're doing something like this, it's good to think about the generative stage where you're just throwing all of the ideas on the wall, and then the evaluative stage where you're narrowing those ideas. And I think, Harris, to your point, we need to get clear on what criteria we are going to use to narrow this list. But I think this is a good opportunity for anybody to just like throw ideas that are missing onto the list. You know, I just wanted, it doesn't have to be fully baked at this point. We'll have another round to think about and whittle down.
Great, thank you for that. Steve?
Well, on the list A, I would include reducing speed limits and maybe installing speed tables.
Great. Yeah, it's easy to not think about it. Those are the traffic improvements that make it better and safer for cyclists and pedestrians, even though they're not technically for the bicyclists and pedestrians. So that's a good reminder in terms of the way we think. Thanks, Steve.
And could I just check? I'm sorry, I couldn't see. If somebody's writing these ideas down, right? I'm not seeing them show up on the document, so I just wanted to make sure someone.
Dana is taking notes, but she's
Okay, great, thank you.
Document, not live.
Yeah.
So
Both-
any other
both-
comments
yeah.
about the bike and ped stuff before we move on to the next bucket? Okay, BC, can you move the next, the transit operations? So that's more, there we go, perfect. So expanding hours and reducing fares, improving coordination. Lots of stuff in there. Any thoughts or comments about this idea of things that will encourage more people to take transit? This is when,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. I didn't see any hands, so I was
Yeah.
gonna start blathering, but go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things that made taking buses in Portland so wonderful was, especially if you were leaving from certain areas, is that they had like real time posted, like, here's when the next bus is coming. And that was tied to GPS things in the buses so that they could tell you to the exact minute when the next bus was coming. And often, because there were 3 buses going to the same place, you could plan your route to minimize your travel time. I know that's kind of an extra amenity. You got to have the buses first, but you know, sort of making it easy for people to know when the next buses are coming, and information like that would be great, a great amenity.
Mhm. So where I was going to go is, and I am going to do my best to figure out how to say this in a way that's like clear and not offensive, but there's an interesting equity thing around public transit, right? So people who, don't have cars, who don't have money, who, people who are disabled, kids, whatever, are more likely to take transit. And so obviously we want to make transit better for those vulnerable folks. If we're going to, well, and there is a hierarchy of transit. who takes the bus and who takes Sonoma County Transit versus who takes Golden Gate versus who takes the train are different, right? And if we want, right, there's the people who take the bus are often the people who have no other way to get somewhere, right? If we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and get people out of the cars, we have to make transit more attractive to people with money. I mean, we have to serve the people without it, but if we want more people to take transit, we have to make it more attractive to those folks. Yeah, most of the conversations about equity and transit focus on one end of it and not the other. And I'm not sure how one does that other than one of the components is the places that I know where people who do have money tend to take transit more often is where it's ridiculously inconvenient and expensive to park a car. So again, that's a policy thing less than an infrastructure thing, you know, but parking policy and parking fees and all that kind of stuff does affect. I mean, my wife, who never took the bus in her entire life when she was in San Francisco for a year, took the bus every single day and came back home and never took the bus again.
Yeah, and there may be some programs around parking that, could cost money, right? Parking management studies and programs that could get to that. But I agree, it's more of a policy. But, there could be some programs that could, help to shift things, right?
What about like offering free Wi-Fi on buses? I don't know if that's a policy. Or
Smart used to have free Wi-Fi and they got rid of that at one point during, I don't know if it was during COVID or if it was a budget thing. Yeah.
it'd be a commuter benefit.
Yeah.
It was expensive and it wasn't very good.
Yeah.
I would just chime in. I think you're right, Eris. I think one of the reasons I am so excited about robust investment in bus like frequency and reliability and priority given to buses on our roads is because those investments in will attract new riders, some with money, as well as dramatically increase the quality of life of people who are transit dependent. So you get this great mutual benefit where it's not us or them, it's everybody benefits from this investment. So that's more on the evaluation side of what we should spend money on, but increased. I think I shared with a smaller group of this committee earlier, but the one of the bus programs in the nation that has currently enjoyed increased ridership year after year is a bus rapid transit that they put in Richmond, Virginia, 7-mile stretch in Richmond, Virginia. And it's made life a lot better for the people who were transit dependent, and it's attracted a lot of new users. So you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Thank you.
If I could just point to the line, row 15 is on preferential treatment for buses on local roadways. So we have all of this kind of in one category. We could break it out if folks think that we should go that way, but this category includes queue jump lanes, which essentially allow buses to get to the, get through red lights quicker than regular traffic. Signal preemption similarly will allow buses to trigger a traffic signal to turn green and get places quicker. And then bus rapid transit is included in this as well. So having
Mhm.
dedicated lanes for bus travel.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see a point in breaking those out into separate lines because it's all sort of one category of things. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the, as someone who used to take the bus a lot when I didn't have a car. And now I take the train, but I hardly ever take the bus because I can take the train to work in the same amount of time as it would take me to drive my car, and taking the bus takes twice as long, and if the bus could go faster, that would eliminate probably some of that thing. And I also wonder if there might want to be something in there though, is in terms of that multimodal thing, in terms of making it easier to bring projects to make it easier to take bicycles on buses and trains, right? Because that's another one of those issues that I take my bike on the train regularly, and I've never taken a train that was so busy I couldn't get it on, but our buses will only hold 2 bikes. And so I never even try, because if you decide you're going to take the bus and then there's no room, then you're just kind of screwed. Now I have to ride all the way to wherever I was going to take the bus to. So something about connection, interconnectivity between bicycles and transit. Any other?
I also just wanted to make sure that Dana saw the comment that came in via chat about the coordination with educational institutions.
We can't see the chat really. It's really tiny. Maybe.
I'll read it out
Somebody
loud
read it?
from
Oh, yeah,
David.
somebody read it.
Yeah, from David. Staff for building capacity and culture around public transportation for schools and colleges, coordinating bus schedules with classes and events.
My God, school buses. Why don't we have school buses on there? Do you know that's the safest way for kids to get to school? More children, I saw the study that children who are killed on their way to school are much more likely to be in a vehicle driven by a family member, and the least likely way for a kid to be killed is in a bus.
I've seen similar statistics about buses in general.
Yeah.
Apparently, teenagers are 18 times more likely to die in a car than on a bus.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have your hand up, Santa?
Yeah. I want to talk to line 11, improve coordination between local and regional transit providers. In the county, I think we have 3 local providers. And I would advocate merging our 3 local providers to give more opportunity for all these other things that we want to reach. So like now, Santa Rosa kind of stops. And so you could have more connection with Sebastopol. So is that something that is just a policy and we cannot really put on this list? Or is it, does it have some funding? It's probably expensive to do this.
There's an initiative kind of happening around that, right?
Yeah,
Right?
so we are working right now with the 3 local bus operators on a transit integration project, which is really we're actually right now working on a transit service planning study to look at how the 3 systems function and how they could function more efficiently and more as one system, and to kind of streamline the planning for the routes between all 3 agencies. And we're doing a number of other efforts around coordinating fares and schedules, marketing and customer information, and eventually branding. So the idea is to have all 3 agencies kind of function as one and be branded the same, and have a single point where people can go for information and to plan their trips. So there is some funding behind it that we do have, and full implementation. We're not sure the total costs yet, but we're in the process of figuring that out. And we're coordinating with a regional effort on a larger Bay Area mapping and wayfinding project that will rebrand and help transit, different transit agencies function better together.
Yeah, from attending some of the MTC meetings, I know that they work on this, and I think in the past you mentioned that you're coordinating or joining this. I mean, function as one. You said function as one. What does that mean?
So essentially, looking at, we'll be looking at all the route numbering systems and make sure that they make sense together, not just as individual agencies, and that transfers are coordinated and timetables are coordinated. So essentially, if we, for example, painted all the buses in the county purple tomorrow, you wouldn't know the difference which agency you're on, because the information you're getting to plan your trip is in one place. The fare you're paying is consistent. This, holiday schedules are the same, fare types are the same. So, so that's sort of what I mean by functioning as one system.
Yeah, I attended MT Mobility Forum the other day, and one of the key information was that people perceive changing buses as this utility. So beyond the time it takes. So people will prefer to go from Cloverdale to Petaluma without having to use all these transits. And it seemed that function as one still would keep the board of directors and the financing all kind of separate. And so maybe it's hard to, without actually merging everything, it would be hard to deal with this issue that we need to have better connectivity in a way that is not experienced as an obstacle.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the better connectivity piece really comes down to funding for operations, which is, limited. And, we all know that we need more routes and routes that, more and better and more frequent routes. But there is a limited amount of money for operations. So I think that, what you're talking about may not have to do with there being 3 different agencies, but more just limited funds for operations.
So, okay, yeah, and I also noticed time, so I want to be sure we get to some of the other buckets, but go ahead, Alexa.
I just want to add bus camp to the list as a way to educate kids about buses. And I can elaborate on it more if anybody wants me to, but basically a week-long camp where kids get dropped off in a single place, and then the camp counselors help them learn how to take the bus to fun places like Epicenter or Armstrong and Redwoods, and so they learn to independently navigate the county via bus, and partnering with the Parks Department to run such a program.
Yeah, that's something that could go under that education tab.
I do think that Santa Rosa does have some camps, summer camps that do that. So I think expanding those is a great idea.
Cool. So shall we move on to the next bucket of the personal mobility? So that's the bike sharing and ride matching and other commute programs, e-bike incentives, stuff that's sort of more programmatic and less building things. Thoughts or comments about any of the things that are on this list or things that might be missing? How much use has the county emergency ride home program gotten?
It's fairly low, which is typical of these types of programs. I think that, they're usually run at the county-wide level. There's some counties that have been doing this for a really long time, like Alameda County, and I think they get more usage. We've only had our program for a few years. And so it's relatively low.
Mhm.
But, you know, we still feel like it's a very good safety net to have and, you know, can make people feel that much more comfortable, taking transit or riding bikes, carpooling.
Any other thoughts about any of these items?
What about, we have expanded bike sharing, but maybe scooter sharing?
Mhm.
Is that, maybe that's already intuitively included, but you know, the scooters without having a docking station for the bike, it's just nicer, easier to use and hop on and off.
Mhm. Yeah, Zeno.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the other way. So you can increase personal mobility by making what people need to access is closer.
I can't hear you.
Closer. So like in Paris, we have the 15-minute neighborhood.
Mhm.
So it would be good for Sonoma County to have a tool that helps local jurisdictions to analyze their city, like Sebastopol. What are the pockets of Sebastopol that you would never expect people to walk from to where they need to go because it's just too burdensome. So there could be a tool that helps identify Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, et cetera, to identify these pockets and then try to improve that situation. So people are more personal mobile, but not because they have an e-bike, but because what they need to reach is closer by.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, question for Tanya or BC, if there's anything that's been discussed in the buildings or even land committees about
Mhm.
you know, focused growth.
Not, I don't know, BC, I don't think so.
No, that's a topic that that the committees have stayed away from.
Mhm. Well, that would seem like a logical place to talk about that,
Yeah.
because we have to change how we design our cities in order to make them easier to get around, but I'm not sure how we operationalize that within
Yeah, and I think
this
thinking about
measure we're talking about.
what would the fund, what is the funding need, or is there a gap there that this measure could help fill that isn't already being addressed through other funding sources? So
Mhm.
yeah, thinking
Mhm.
about, what are those gaps that might?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know what that would be.
Okay, I see Steve's hand up.
Yeah, it's sort of a lightning rod, but you can reduce VMT by about a third to the extent that you price parking.
Mm,
So value-based parking should come in here somewhere.
yeah, not sure how we work it in. It's something we need, but yeah.
Everybody hates it, but it's reality. We have to do it.
Yeah. Okay, do we have how hard is our stop at 6? Okay, I want to at least be able to touch on the other 3 things that we have down at the bottom there. Because then we can, those of us who can stay can talk forever. Well, not forever, because I have a train to catch on, but so these 2, 3, so he's already there. Okay, so there were these 3 things down here that didn't have specific projects, but I think actually maybe you should explain it, BC, because you were the one who sort of.
Sure. So this is just this is an idea of mine. As I was looking through project lists for each of the 3 committees, I identified that there were obviously projects that fit very well into a specific bucket. But then there were also topics like education or workforce or social equity that crossed all of these sectors. And even though they need to be discussed as transportation specific, in the end, it might be an interesting way to look at them, that these educational things for transportation could be grouped with educational services around buildings and land and water. So there's the ability to think about these cross-sector as well, even though for this exercise, it's really, what are these things having to do with education, workforce, and equity that are specific to transportation?
Mhm. Okay, Alexa?
Yeah, so in addition to the safe routes to schoolwork and the bus camp in the workforce training, and I know if David's still on the call at the JC, we've talked about like a bike barn where bike mechanics are trained. So I'm wondering if there would be, like, we could have funding available for, you know, either to bolster the work that a place like Community Bikes is already doing, and have a few of them around the county that are really training people how to maintain, especially just a new generation of electric cargo bikes and cargo, you know, or just electric bikes in general.
Yeah, there's not just a shortage of bike mechanics, there's a shortage of automobile, bus, and train mechanics, and also transit drivers too. So there's a whole cluster of things there that could be worked into that. I think that workforce training and education. Okay, I have a complicated thoughts about that based on other work that I've done. I mean, so education fills a knowledge gap, training fills a skills gap, right? I've worked in many sectors where the only thing people can think of to do to change something is to throw education at it, when the problem isn't about knowledge or skills. And so, and this probably all sounds weird coming from someone who runs an organization that does a lot of education programs, but that's something we can do, right? When we get to the point of like, how much money do we allocate to each bucket or whatever, I would not want to see getting the stuff built is the hardest thing. Throwing education programs out there is easy and everybody wants to do it and can feel like, okay, we did this education program. Well, how come nobody's riding the bus when we did our bus education program? Well, because we didn't fix the other things that made people able to take the bus or the bike or the whatever. So as much as education, right? We talk about 5 E's in our thing about, education, engineering, evaluation, encouragement, enforcement. It's too easy. People want to throw money at education because it's the easiest one to do. And so I want to not overemphasize that. Now, I think this workforce training, I think is a cool thing, that because I think that helps. I know I've been in conversations like with Eddie over at Smart or other things where they're having challenges hiring people who can drive trains, or my friends who are car mechanics or bike mechanics, they can't hire enough people to do the work. So those make sense to me, but I just want to be careful about how we language it, if that makes any sense. Yeah, Zeno.
Yeah, I learned not too long ago about the importance of shock and habit. I think that
What?
shock and habit.
Habit, okay.
Habit. So a lot of our transportation behavior is based on habit. I mean, you can see that on the road where people keep using their car, although it takes like a half an hour longer than it took like 5 years ago because of all the extra cars that are on the road. And so people often will need a shock. For example, in London, underground, a line got down, it was down for like 3-4 weeks, and people had to find other ways to get to where they need to go. The line was reestablished, and then people didn't all move to that line, but they were better. They felt that their solution was better than the old line. So that kind of measures how much habit people had that is kind of against their own interest. So education for me is connected with shock.
Shock?
Shock.
Okay.
You want to educate people that are in shock. So you have to have a nimble setup where you can direct your education in the county where there was some kind of disturbance. So for example, there could be a road closure that is long and kind of burdensome. You could provide a bus service there because people need an alternative. They're shocked out of their habit. They need an alternative. And so that is a point in which education can be more effective, I think. So I think that my main point is that habits are so important in transportation. We keep doing things that we know are not in our interest. We only get out of it when we cannot do it anymore because of shock to the system. We change our habits. And hopefully, if this kind of approach is taken, people will see that habits involving active mobility have great advantages.
So I want to connect this to, I used to work in the alcohol and drug abuse prevention field. So, right, like if education by itself worked, no one on the planet would still smoke, right? Right? It would, everybody knows that it's not good for you, right? So the education by itself didn't do it. Or, you know, alcohol or any other bad behavior. We can do things in the environment, like we're talking about with transportation, that make it easier to make the good choice and harder to make the bad choice, right? We're trying to make it cheaper, more comfortable, faster to take the bus or to ride a bike than it is to ride a car. But that shock thing that you talk about, right? About people like the, you know, alcoholic hitting bottom or whatever. I don't know how easy it is to impose that from the outside. Right. And maybe that something happens that catalyzes that. I mean, I'm always of the thing that like let no disaster go unexploited, but I don't know, right, that you can manufacture it ethically.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we shock the system, but we need to be.
That's what it sounds like.
We need to be aware of this phenomenon that people have habits, that they get out of their habits when they're shocked. So that's why I say nimble, maybe a non-profit that can work more nimbly than a government agency that can kind of redirect their resources on within 24 hours because there's a shock, right?
You know what's the other one that I've been thinking about? We're getting really way out here now.
Sorry, Aris, I just want to make sure because we're coming right up on 6. Was there one more bucket that we haven't looked at yet?
I think we've hit all the buckets. We've at least dipped toes into each.
Okay.
So the other time that people don't do what they do, you know, their habits is when they go on vacation, right? How many people who never take transit or ride a bike or whatever in their daily lives, they go on vacation and they use a rental bike or they take the train to get somewhere. So maybe we need some sort of like connection with the tourism people and like, rather than, you know, we so get into the public health realm of that like nanny thing of do this because it's good for you. You should, you know, eat vegetables because it's good for you. And you should ride a bike or take the bus because it's good for you. But, you know, part of why I ride a bike is because it's more fun and I'm happier when I do. And so if we like, how do we turn like, okay, you had so much fun doing that when you're on vacation. Guess what? You could do it at home too. You know, in our marketing, you know, messages and campaigns and things around this. It's not framing it as doom, gloom, kaboom, the, you know, planet's frying. I mean, yes, that's true, but that's not always as motivating people as like, hey, come on out, let's go ride a bike for tacos. That's really fun. And your life will be happier. So is that a nice
Okay,
answer?
there. I could use some tacos right about now. I am going to have to hop off. So I just wanted to quickly ask about next steps. So I'm assuming, Dana, you're going to sort of type all this stuff into these charts. And then do we also want to start developing a list of criteria by which we will prioritize them? And maybe we could spend more of our next meeting actually trying to do some of that prioritizing, or if BC and Tanya and Dana, if you had something else in mind, please let me know. I'm just wondering about these next steps.
That kind of went along with what I was thinking too. Like, so first we've always talked about, let's think about who we know that's not like us, that we want to, you know, kind of get involved for around the equity piece, but also what criteria should we think about if we all can start coming up with those before the next meeting would be good. Can someone read what the chat
Yeah,
is?
I can read there. Where'd it go?
I think somebody had to leave.
Oh, just from Steve Bertelbaugh. In the rest of the world, education on transportation is very common and we need to catch up. And
Yeah, it's part of your everyday school thing.
then this got, David Liebman says, here's the cost from 2019 for a smart technician workforce training for a trained technician and signal technician for a 3-year apprenticeship program. That cost is $700,000.
Wow.
Hopefully there's not others.
That's for one person to go through, get certified,
Apparently,
Wow.
is $70,000?
100,
Wait, $170,000?
70.
700,000.
Geez.
This is according to Mr.
Then that's for
Liebman.
3 years, like,
So-
so it's an FTE for 3 years.
Or like 3, is that 2?
That kind of makes sense, actually. I mean.
Okay, so over 3 years, yeah, but
Just
still, that's,
Jump in real quick before Alexa has to sign
Yeah.
off in terms of one other next step and upcoming event for the committee to be aware of is the
Mhm.
April 19th community workshop. And so we would like to, and this will be Eris and Alexa as your chairs presenting some version of this list. So what I would offer is that staff can work with you, Eris and
Mhm.
Alexa, and if there's other committee members that want to connect between now and that meeting to get that list ready to share. So I think we've made some good progress this evening and have a lot of good ideas, but
Mhm.
figuring out what you want to share at that meeting will be important. So.
great. All right, thank you, everyone, for coming. I know we didn't hear from everyone, so I'm assuming that must mean you are hatching more brilliant ideas in your heads, and you can email them to us, and we make sure that we get them all in there. Yes, I can't, David.
Eris,
David.
I just had 2 comments before folks head out. One was one item that I didn't see that I'm not sure has been talked about is, and it's not really being done in California because it goes against most car manufacturers, but EV retrofit kits are a more equitable solution for, folks retrofitting existing cars and drivetrains. It also is a better embodied carbon solution, but it goes against the dealer model ship of selling newer and more cars. But that's one option. And then the last question I had for folks was just, has there been any thought on how resiliency is being integrated along with equity in looking at the proposed projects? So like a good example would be, right, there's a lot of talk, I know, and I know Dana knows, with Highway 37 and the equity, right, from, Solano to, right, Sonoma, but then, right, climate resiliency, Highway 37 is going to be underwater. So I'm just curious, like, where a resiliency is being integrated for equity. And that could easily apply along the 12. We all know they built the new bridge into Sebastopol, and then that next year flooded the Barlow as a good example. So my last thought.
A big
Isn't
part
the
of
land-
101 just buckled too in the recent floods, right?
Yeah. Isn't the land committee kind of looking at a lot of that stuff or no? But yeah, this does overlap with
They
transportation.
are, but I mean, it could be a criteria or another lens to
Mhm.
look at these projects,
Mhm.
to think about where is our transportation system vulnerable, and does that, lead us to some recommended projects.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
think it's a great
Okay.
point.
Thank you. Thank you for
I
that.
would just add that, folks who take SMART, right, to Marin, you all know when we go near the dump, that's going to be underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, and they didn't raise it when they redid the tracks. So.
Yeah.
Just.
All right, thank you. Okay, are we ready to officially adjourn? Can I bang the gavel?
Please.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing
Alexa.
you.
Thank you.